tardes. Bienvenidos y bienvenidas a esta quinta conferencia del segundo ciclo de conferencias sobre China contemporánea, diplomacia económica de China en América Latina y el Caribe. Mi nombre es Sergio Rivero y soy el director de la Cátedra China Contemporánea y coordinador regional de Cooperación Internacional e Investigación de la Secretaría General de la Flaxo. Esta conferencia, como se les había anunciado, será en idioma inglés. Entonces voy a iniciar, hacer el cambio de idioma. Welcome everyone to this conference. It's a pleasure for us to have today Professor Zhoumi. Welcome, Professor. Before we start, I want to introduce him properly. So I have here his mini bio. Dr. Zhoumi is a senior research fellow and the deputy director of the Institute of American and Oceania Studies, CAITEC, from the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation, CAITEC. He received his PhD in economics from Beihang University and worked as a postdoc in Fudan University. He was also a visiting scholar at Stanford University and at the Korean International Economy Policy Institute. Dr. Cho's research field include the outward investment, international contracting, international labor cooperation, international aid, trading services, international rules and agreements, and his research focuses on the government decision-making, negotiation, and trend judgment on these areas, facilitating their better understanding to the domestic and international environment, improvement of the management efficiency, and better allocation of resources. He has authored one and edited more than a dozen books and published more than 300 articles. He has led or participated in more than 100 research projects which support the decision-making or provide consultations for a wide range of ministries, local governments, international organizations, and enterprises. Such an honor to have you here with us, Professor Zhoumi.
My pleasure.
So the floor is all yours. You can start whenever you please.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Let me just share my screen first. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it perfectly. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. And the video is very beautiful. It reminds me a lot of my memories in the different places in China, not only with the beautiful sceneries, but also from the different culture and the very delicious food and some kinds of art. And today is a very special day here because I'm now in Guangxi province and we are under the strike of a typhoon. And it's a very cloudy, windy, and a lot of rains here. So I'm sure that we are in a different regions must feel quite different. But my topic today is mainly something to do with trade, and I'm from the MOFCOM, the Ministry of Commerce, and we are the Academy of Ministry of Commerce. About 70 years old for our academy. We are doing the research and support the decisions of the government, including MOFCOM, involved in different kinds of negotiations like the WTO and also the free trade agreement. So today I will try to use about 15 minutes to introduce some of my ideas about the trade and also the practices of Chinese government, and leave you sometimes if you have any questions, we can have some communication. I think that's better than just I talk and talk. I noticed that there's almost 100 audience in this place, so it's a very nice and my pleasure to be here to introduce the things. Actually, today when we're trying to talk about the trade relations between China and the Mercosur countries, I noticed that there were several things I want to first mention as a background. First, that why we are trying to very serious about the trade, because trade is important. Trade is a kind of a reflection of the resources and the comparative advantages. So when the world was started about several centuries ago, they are started by the trade. But maybe at that time, there are not common currency like US dollars. They are using the gold and silver or different kind of precious metal to be used as the intermediate for the trade. But trade is a kind of very important ways that all the countries or regions are trying to make better use of what they have to exchange for what they don't have. After so many years, we think there are a lot of differences. The differences have changed the rules, like to start the WTO, like to improve the technology, while the trade is still there. And maybe it's more important than the past. So when we are seeing there are so many conflicts between China and the United States with different countries and regions, but I believe that trade will still keeping a very important role, especially for some smaller economy. You may notice that after the pandemic, a lot of countries adjusting their policies, while the small economies like Singapore, like New Zealand, they are one of the first batch of countries to open their market, because especially important for the smaller economies. They cannot produce everything. They have to be in the global supply chain. They have to trying to use what they have to trying to get what they don't have. And second background is that when we are trying to do something like to put in the trade, making the trade flourish is a very important trend or directions to meet the stakeholders for better usage of the related factors and support the development of the society. So when China is a very big country, as you may find from the video, the sceneries, the climate, and the resources are quite different from the desert to the rainforest, from the plantain to the highland. There are so many different sceneries here. But how can we try to have a better life? We have to import more things from other countries. Well, that is why we are trying to establish a very important expo, the Chinese International Import Expo, at the beginning of the month after next. It's November, 2 months later. So it's a kind of very big innovation, because we are trying to import more things, not only to export what we have. We are in the position that the import from other countries are crucial for us, because we need to get more products, different foods, different industrial products, and also the services. And next week we will have the Chinese expo of the trading services in Beijing. Is a kind of very big one of the 4 national exhibitions here in Beijing, in China. In China, that we will try to encourage the communication and trade happens, not only for the trade in goods, like what we are mainly focused today, mainly on the trade in goods. And third one is that, China is both the advocator and practitioner of economy globalization. We believe that globalization is not only just an alternative, a choice. It's actually some of a necessity that we need to follow, because the globalization means that all the countries or economies should not only try to think about themselves. We should try to have a bigger picture. We have to understand a trend. Otherwise, we will be, very dangerous position, because that's the international market for the commodities and also for other supply chains. It has been very closely connected in between. So we are one of the advocates that we believe that the rules are important. If we have committed something, we must fulfill our commitment, like in WTO to lower our tariffs and open our market. So we are trying to follow our commitments, while at the same time, we are open to some new rules, like for, we have applied for the join of the CPTPP, the Comprehensive Partnership of the Pacific regions, and also the DIPA, the Digital Economy Partnership. So we are open to these new things. Maybe we are not so ready for all this kind of new form of trade, but I think it's open for us to discuss about the rules and what kind of things we can do to change our status or improve our regulations. So that is our attitude to the changing world. We are not trying to close our market to wait for everything to return to its original position. We are trying to do something different. We are trying to improve the rules quality. That is what we call the high quality development that I will introduce later. And the last background is that with our FTA strategy, China is willing to establish the mechanism to provide a sustainable environment for business. That means that we are doing something like more on the free trade agreements, not only in the multilateral levels. We are doing something in the bilateral levels or regional levels, because that it is a kind of rules that WTO permits all the members. They can negotiate FTA if they are not something to do harm to the multilateral system. So it's open for us to also trying to establish the free trade agreement. So you may find this year, at the beginning of this year, a very big free trade agreements, the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, between 14 countries has formed. Well, maybe there are still several members, they haven't ratified that agreement, but we are open to other countries, like what we are trying to talk about, the Mercosur. That I think it's our, we want to do something to improve the bilateral cooperation between China and the Mercosur countries, while we are also open to any other forms of free trade agreement or kind of a mechanism. So today I will try to discuss the following 6 parts. The first one is China's trade policy framework. Second is our trade regulation with Latin America, relationship with Latin America and the Caribbean countries. And third one is China's recent trade development, what we have achieved for the first half of this year, and then the bilateral trade relationship with the Mercosur countries, and some potentials and suggestions. That is what I want to share with you. While trying to look at the trade relationship between China and the Mercosur countries, I read some paper. And in some paper, they raised a question. The question is that whether the trade with China, I mean, from the Latin American countries or Mercosur countries angle, whether the trade with China benefit or reduce the welfare of the Mercosur countries. Actually, that they are having the experts or researchers have different opinions. Some experts believe that trade is improving the status, the social welfare, and also other kind of the conditions of the Mercosur countries. But some believe that the trade has changed a lot the structure, the sector structures of those countries, which may be not as good as we may foresee. So I think it's a very interesting question, but to me, I mean, that answer is not easy to have. Well, I may try to give you some of my ideas about my judgment at the end. But before that, I will try to follow this the framework which I want to talk. The first one is China's trade policy framework. I want to do that because that I have to find out some there are some kind of reference for us to discuss about what we can do. Actually, when trying to do that, I use different resources. There are different understanding about the trade policies, introduction of China. Well, at last I choose the trade policy review mechanism. As in the WTO, we have 2 years or annual trade policy review mechanism for the big economies, the trade economies. So I use that part to introduce you the China's trade policies. As for the trade policy, especially for the management, there are two very important ministries. They are NDRC and MOFCOM. NDRC is the National Development and Reform Commission, which is a comprehensive ministry who are dealing not only with the trade, but also with a lot of projects, infrastructure, mainly infrastructure and planning. So NDRC oversees China's macroeconomic planning, and it is responsible for formulating and implementing the strategy for the national economy and the social development and coordinating major economic operations. Well, MOFCOM is a little bit more specific. MOFCOM is mainly responsible for the coordination and implementation of the trade-related investment and economic cooperation policies. So in most occasions for the trade negotiations like the WTO and FTA, also you can find in the Minister Conference in WTO, MOFCOM is the leading ministry to organize all the participants from China to attend that. Well, that is the administrations. While we are doing the trade policies in the 5 years basis, that means that we are using the 5-year plans to try to foresee the future, to have some kind of goals for us to try to reach in the next 5 years. So if you are reviewing those 5-year plans from the first 5-year plans to nowadays the 14th 5-year plans, you may find that the trade has changed a lot about the definition and about the goals, about the ways to achieve those goals. So, in the past, especially the 1980s and 1990s, most of our efforts are put on the expansion of our trade. Because at that time, we are gradually open to the world. After 1978, we opened to the world by the reform of ourselves, but also by some kind of policies and the regulations improvements. But after 2001, after we access to WTO, everything changed. All the companies are having a much bigger platforms for them to try to explore. So after that, you can still find that the expansion of the trade of China is accelerated. It's speed up. There are so many Chinese import and exports after that. But nowadays, we have changed a lot of our goals. We will not put the position of expansion of our trade in the first position. We are trying to change our trade goals from the expanding of the trade to high quality trade development. That is our ideas, not only to increase the volumes of trade, but trying to improve the quality of that with innovation in science and technology to improve the trade structures, like for machineries, more more products with the intellectual properties and with more technology. Why trying to improve that? Because that we understand that the industry transfer has happened for centuries from one country to another, and we cannot stop the trend. I think that you may heard that there are some kind of transfer from China to Vietnam to other ASEAN countries, even to African countries. I think we don't have to be afraid of that, because the transfer of the industries will keep on if we have more trade and investment. But what we are trying to do to fill the gaps, to fill the those kind of space by innovation, by new industries. That is our ideas about the trade. But for the two-way investment, it's also a very important issues to do with the trade. Actually, today I will not talk too much about the investment, but we may understand that the investment is an integral part of the trade. It has a complementary roles in helping the trade to develop and to make better position. As for the when we are talking about the trade, I have to mention that there is another goal we have put in very serious position, that is the climate change promises. So we promise to reach peak in the greenhouse gas emissions before 2030, about 8 years later, and the carbon neutrality before 2060 through industrial restructuring, energy structure optimization, energy conservation, and efficiency improvement. So when I'm talking about that, I think that is related to trade, because that when we are exporting something, when we are producing something, we have to think about the whole life cycle of those products. So we need to reduce the emission, not only to reduce ourselves, we may try to improve the exports of some intermediate for other countries to less suffering from the emission of the greenhouse gases. So that is the very, very quick briefing about the China trade policy framework. Actually, that we are having a quite wider range of cooperation with other countries, and what we are trying to do with the relationship with Latin America and also the Caribbean countries is a kind of very important part of our trade policies. So what is high quality? The high quality is are kind of very wide, but you can imagine it, but it's not so easy to describe it. So I want to say that between China and the Latin American and Caribbean countries, we have proposed that we are going to bring the comprehensive and cooperative partnership to new heights. So including the following 5 parts. The first one is to sticking to the principle of equality and sincere mutual support is the fundamental premise of the development of relations between China and Latin America and the Caribbean. That is our first principle, that when we're trying to develop the trade relationship with those countries, I mean, that is the first principle. We are thinking about these ideas in equally ways, that we are not trying to see that China is a big country. Maybe we should have a better position. That is not our position to deal with the trade. And secondly, that we are seeking the mutually beneficiary cooperation and the common development in the which is endogenous driving force for the development of the relationship. While I mean that is not always the case, we are trying to focus on the development of the economies and society, but I think that it is also possible for us to help to reach that goal by the international trade. So maybe these countries, they decided what they want. They want to import something. They want to do some kind of infrastructure improvement, while the trade can help them to finish, to accomplish, to reach that goals. And third one is that we are going to exchanges and the mutual learnings, as well as carrying forward the friendship from generation to generation, which is a solid foundation of the relationship. Actually, it means that it is not only something to do with the trade, it has a lot of relationship with a culture exchange, which are different kind of ideas, opinions about the development of these regions and of the earth. I think it's a kind of time series related. relationship. It could be important for the trade improvement. And fourth one is China and Latin America and the Caribbean countries share a global responsibility in promoting international cooperation, equity, and justice. We're not only observers or beneficiaries of the trade. We are the actually practitioners and also a part of the world. So we have to do something together. And the last one is we are going to promote complementary development and collective bilateral cooperation, which is a strategic path for developing the bilateral relationships. So it's that is the 5 principles and paths for us to try to address the trade relationship between China and Latin America and the Caribbean countries. That is what we have explicitly expressed in the document, in the white paper between China and Latin America and the Caribbean countries. Well, when we are talking about that, how's the development of China? Is that so good in the strike of the COVID? A very, very uncertain factor. Actually, China suffered a lot in the first half, especially when we have to be silent for Shanghai for about 2 months, from the 1st of April to the 1st of June. I think it's 2 months or 3 months. I cannot remember very clearly. But Shanghai is one of the central cities of China. It has a lot of relationship with other part of China. So the supply chain are facing very big challenges. So how about the performance of the first half of 2022? In 2022, the first half, China strives to maintain the stable macroeconomic performance and achieving a steady growth in the foreign trade. So if you are looking at the trade performance itself, you can find that China's foreign trade volume in the goods in the first half of 2022 reached 19.8 trillion RMB, up by 9.4% year on year. It's a not very easy one, because that for the first quarter of this year, it's I think it's only 2 or 3%, and the second half, the second quarter is also a more challenging session for us to achieve our trade goals. So the exports grew by 13.2%, and the imports increased by 4.8%. That is the general positions. How about the structure of the trade? We have different performance about the trade. As for the foreign trade growth in the May and June picked up significantly. Since May this year, China's pandemic prevention and control situation has continued to improve, and the pro-growth policies have gradually paid off its functions. So the foreign trade enterprises have made steady progress in resuming work and production, which is what we want to have, because like where I am in Guangxi, for the car making industries, they have to get a lot of auto parts from Shanghai and related areas. So if they cannot have those parts, they cannot assemble the cars and they cannot export to other countries. Well, when we're talking about the cars, there are so many new energy cars are finished and export to other countries, which is part of a very important export from China. Well, second is that the proportion of the general trade continued to increase. And third one is that import and export with the major trading partners kept growing. But I have to say that major partners not include the Latin America countries. Most of them are the ASEAN countries, United States, European countries. They are 3 of our main trade partners, and also South Korea and Japan. The foreign trade entities have been further invigorated, and the last characteristic is that imports and exports of major products enjoyed steady growth. So since the time is tight, I will not discuss the details. Actually, that if you are look at the first half of this year on the China's trade, you may find that it's still noticing to have better positions, and they are attracting because that Chinese markets not only to export to other countries, but also to import a lot of different goods from other countries. They're very active. We are trying to better integrate domestically for the domestic market. Well, the market has made its choices as China's trade has played much more important role in Mercosur countries. When we're talking about Mercosur countries, we have to notice that Mercosur countries, like for that mechanism, I read some articles and also some of the documents of Mercosur, and I found that the mechanism is a little bit different from other common market mechanism. And when the four countries they enter into the agreement, they have placed a lot of not that tight arrangement in between. So when they want to develop their policy, when they are facing with different challenges and opportunities, the trade coordinations, especially for the tariffs, are not so easy. When they are trying to improve the efficiency, like as the time goes, that everything has to improve, even for WTO, and you can also find in NAFTA. I think that it is also possible and reasonable for Mercosur to develop to try to improve its mechanism, but it's not my decision. So I have to say that if you are looking at the totally or the total trade between China and Mercosur, you may find that it has improved a lot. If we look at the year of 2001, when China accessed to WTO, the trade between Mercosur and China is when the import and the export is only 3.2% and 2.8%. So roughly 3% of all the import and export of Mercosur. Well, in the year of 2014, that the import and export has accounted for 16.3% and 14.2% of Mercosur's import and export. So about 4 times increase as a share. And I mean, that means that the trade relationship between China and the Mercosur countries have improved a lot in the past decade. Well, after 8 years from 2014 till now, China is Brazil's largest trading partner and the second largest trading partner of Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay. So as for the 4 countries, China is one of the most trade partners. Actually, that when we are looking at a different situation, you may find that the export to China and the world, it's very easy to recognize that the higher bars are the exports of those countries to the world, while the shorter one is the export to China. So you may find that for 4 countries, they are in different positions. As for Argentina, export to China is not that high, about less than or almost 5% of its exports, while it is in the trend of increasing. Well, for the Brazil, it's much higher. About the export to China is almost 1/4 of its totally export, and it's still increasing. Not only for the volume volume of export, but also for the share of export to China is becoming more and more important for Brazil. Uruguay is also like that, but in the year of 2020, it's a little bit lower, as we don't have the data for 2021. And Paraguay, you cannot even notice that there is some bar from the exporting to China. So actually, for those 4 countries that they are facing a different stage, I'm trying to use this graph to have some comparison between different countries. So you may find that for the 4 mature countries, they are exporting to China in different patterns. The reason is that not only because of their development, but also because that the structure of the trade are quite different. So as for one of the most important products, the soil, Brazil and Argentina are exporting more to China. Well, in some reason that Argentina, they don't think it's necessary and right to export too many agricultural products to China. They have to also to keep it for the domestic demand. So actually, that's why we are seeing there are some different patterns. But it's not only not the whole reason, all the reasons that they are doing the business like that. When we are talking about the import, it's almost the similar pattern compared with the exports. You may also find that the situation are similar, but if you are looking at more details, you may find that for Argentina, the import from China is getting a bigger share of its import from the world. Well, it is also happened in Brazil and Uruguay. They are all depending more than exports. So for these 2 graphs, we may have a general idea that trade between China and the mature countries, especially from their angles, that the trade to China is the importance of trade to China is increasing. That's a trend of the share. If we only judge from this indicator, we may find that the trade between China and the mature are getting more importance in mature countries' trade relationship. But when we are trying to combine these 2 activities of import and export, I calculate our index, the trade competitiveness index. It's a kind of a very general accepted indicator for us to compare with 2 countries about the relationship between import and export. So I'm using this index from China's angles, on our TC, the trade competitive TCI. So I just use the monthly data of this year from January to June. You can find that China's, for the index, I'm sure that some of you must know that, but for those who are not so familiar with that, the index means that we are using the export to minus the import and divided by the export plus import. So it's a kind of index that we are showing that the relationship between 2 countries. If you are just looking at this graph, the index, you may find that for 2 countries, the Brazil and the Uruguay, China is less competitive because that we are importing more things from those 2 countries. While for Argentina and Paraguay, we are in a much better position in the international trade. Even you are looking at Paraguay, we almost reached the threshold of 1%. It means that all export and no import. So 0.94 is much higher. I think that one of the reasons is that China and Paraguay, we don't have established the diplomatic relationship. So it's not so easy for Chinese company to import more things from them. Well, they are doing that, but it's not so easy for them to expand their business. Well, for Argentina, China is also in a better position for the export. So even for the mature countries, you may find that the bilateral trade with 4 different countries are quite different. That's the reason when we are talking about the trade relationship, I have to say that maybe totally that we are in a increasing trend between China and the Mercosur countries. Well, for the 4 different countries, we are doing these things different. So if you are trying to improve the trade in the future, maybe we have to adopt different scenarios. Actually, personally, in my position, I don't think it's a bad thing if we import more things from Brazil and Uruguay. I think it's a kind of choices by the market. The market is choosing what they want to have, and Brazil and Uruguay's soil and also other products, they are very competitive. So we can import more things from them. There's no bad things. Well, for Argentina, we export more things to them, and if they have limited some export to China, it's not strange that we have a more competitive status. Well, no matter deficit or kind of surplus, I think it's a very natural thing for the choice of the market. That is for the competitive index of the first 6 months this year. And when we are trying to look at the index with the Mercosur countries, we may find that that is, with graph, it's much easier for us to recognize that the competitiveness of Chinese exports are increasing for Argentina and Paraguay. Well, they are a little bit unstable for other 2 countries. So since the time is limited, I will try to briefly introduce the trade between China and those Mercosur countries. The first is Argentina. Argentina is China's 6th largest trading partner in Latin America, and China is Argentina's 2nd largest trading partner, export market, and import source country. So it means that we have very close relationship with this very big country in Latin America. Well, the export and import structure is quite different. You may find that China mainly exports machinery and equipment, electrical and electronic products, the computer and the communication equipment, motorcycles, textiles, and clothing to Argentina. Well, actually, that it's much similar for a lot of other countries. We are exporting those machineries and electronics, and the electrical products. But for motorcycle, textiles, and the clothing, maybe they are different. We also import some of those products from other countries. And what our mainly import from Argentina are soybean oil, crude oil, leather, and other commodities. So the trade between these 2 countries, you may find, is still, I have to say that they are complementary. Well, the second is that they are not in a very, very closely integrated. It's just a trade for the input of the manufacturing and the society. As for the Argentina, from China's angles, that Argentina is China's 3rd largest source of soybean imports. Well, it's a very interesting topic about the soil, and I have done a research this year about the soil trade, and I found there are so many things that we may know, we may not know about that, but there are so many things for us to mention if we are trying to do the research. I think that's very interesting topic. The trade with Brazil is a little bit different. Since 2009, China has been Brazil's largest trading partner for 12 consecutive years. In 2020, China will be Brazil's largest export market and the largest sources of imports. Well, Brazil is China's largest trading partner in Latin America. The main products China imports from Brazil are soybean, iron ore, oil, beef, chemical, wood pulp, sugar, chicken, pork, cotton, alloy, etc. In the year of 2020, China imported a lot of soil and also different kind of things. We may not read the numbers, Well, the main products that China exports to Brazil are ships, machineries, electronics equipment, and integrated circuits. So, I mean, both countries are developing the trade just like Argentina, but you may notice that they are not so closing or the structure are a little bit different. For Uruguay, is we are their largest exporter of soils, wool, and pump, and it is China's fourth and the fifth largest source of beef and soybeans. So I have met with the leaders from both sides of Uruguay, and we discussed a lot about the trade potentials. I think that there are so many potentials for us to develop to improve the bilateral trade with Uruguay, and we both agree, no matter the red one, the white one, they agree that Uruguay should establish a much better relationship with China, and we agree that also. So there are so many potentials for these two countries to improve. The last one is the Paraguay. It's a little bit challenging for us, but we can still look at the trade data not from the diplomatic way. In 2021, China mainly imports copper and articles and raw hides and skins and lashes from Paraguay, accounting for 50% and 36% of the total import. Well, the exports quite a large range of products to Paraguay, covering 77 different HS2 code categories, especially among the electrical machineries and the rubber and articles. So we have exported a lot of things to that country. So you may find that for the 4 different Mercosur countries, we are doing different jobs and the trades are quite different. So actually, when we are talking about the trade potentials, what we can do? I think that I have considered and thought about these questions for some time. And in my idea that we can do more things, not only to keep the trend of today's trade relationship. We are in the position to improve that. The first one should be the supply chain, because the supply chain is under big pressures from different challenges. So we can try to do better to establish a sustainable, predictable, and resilient. And the supply chain of these 3 factors would be good for all the countries. So the supply chain is, not only a way of logistics, it's also something to do with the prediction of the demand and the ability to produce them. So supply chain is a very big question that for China and the Mercosur countries, we can enhance or strengthen. Well, when we're talking about the supply chain, it's not only the traditional one. Maybe we can discuss the green supply chain, which are the promises and the responsible way of the future. That is something we can try to improve. And the logistics are also important because that Mercosur countries are near the Atlantic and we're in the Pacific. So when we're trying to do business, it's always be a problem to have a very long time of waiting and very difficult, especially for the different weather of the hurricane or the typhoon, different challenges for the shipment. And logistics could be improved with the support with technology. That is also the potential areas. The second one is financial cooperation. We can try to look at the pressures from the Fed when they are trying to tightening the monetary policy, and it makes us harder for the developing countries, not only the Mercosur but also China, we are facing very big challenges for the outflow of the capital. And the trade-based financial innovation is helpful if we are improving the conditions for the banks and the related capital to support the trade between our partners. And they need some innovation, especially for some currencies, not only the US dollars, like for RMB and for the currencies of the Mercosur countries themselves. And third part is the mechanism do matter. We notice that Mercosur is a kind of a common market, which has a requirement for all the countries to do the same on the tariffs, but actually we can still try to improve better ability to improve the trade mechanism, maybe in the form of FTA, maybe not. I think it's very natural for the countries to improve the mechanism, and the mechanism are important not only for the preferential treatment, but also for the signals they are sending to the market that we will have more stable, predictable environment for the trade and the investment. While the new areas such as e-commerce and other areas that can also be improved. So last, I will give some of the suggestions, my suggestions on the bilateral trade relationship between our two parts. The first one is that asymmetric trade pattern exists and will prevail. Need more understanding. I have introduced that the trade structures between China and Mercosur countries, they are quite different from one country to another. Actually, if you are looking at the details, you may find that trade between the provinces, between the states, between different regions, they are doing different. So we have to understand that this is the choices of the market. Maybe we can try to improve that by better involvement and support from the policies, from technology, from mechanism, but maybe we should not try to blame those stakeholders on why you are only doing that, because that everybody wants better off. They are making decisions on what they can have, where they provided by the opportunities and choices. So I think that we have to understand that these patterns cannot change overnight. It will improve if we are able to produce more and the ability to produce better products. I think that is possible because that all of the efforts of China is trying to establish more channels for the trade with other countries. The second suggestion is that cooperation should be promoted along the supply chain through the upstream to the downstream. So we don't think that it's a our even efficient way if we only import the ores from other countries and do everything processing here in China. I think it's better if we can have more, just import the intermediate products. So it is also true for other areas. When we are trying to talk about the cooperation, it's not only the vertical, kind of a location in the supply chain. Maybe we can cooperate in different regions, different places in the supply chain. I believe that is much possible, especially when we're talking about the trade between China and the Mercosur countries. And the last suggestion is that the innovation of technology and the rules could be possible when the time changes. Some people argue that the common market don't allow some countries, some members to independently to reach an agreement with other countries. I think that everything can change, especially when the time changes, when we're trying to improve the welfare of these countries, of these members. We maybe consider about that. If we just keep everything closed, maybe the market will not react accordingly to the new changes. So it is possible for some new technology and rules to be applied in this regard. That is a very short introduction of our findings about trade between China and the Mercosur countries. I think that maybe I will leave you some time for Q&A. Thank you.